Eck was in a German panzer at Omaha Beach on the coast of France on D-Day in 1944. Formerly of Pforzheim in southern Germany, today he is a tool and die maker, living in Glendale, California.
Seine Heimatstadt zurückkehrt.
When you go back to your hometown, you must have a battle story to tell about. I wasn't afraid of nothing. Don't think I talk big. Sometimes I was shaking, but in a fight you forget. I wanted a medal, so I was brave.
William Joseph was in the first wave at Omaha Beach on D-Day 1944. Today he lives in San Jose, California. He's a painting contractor and his hobby is building racing cars.
I was at the front of the landing craft and I crawled up on the ramp and looked at the beach. We were still far enough out I couldn't make out too much. Looked kind of smoky and hazy. We wondered how we were going to make out.
At bloody Omaha Beach, the lives of William Joseph and Rudy Eck came together for a brief moment. Two fighting men, one American, one German, relived that moment in history. I'm Jim Bishop. With the exception of total victory, nothing in World War II was so eagerly awaited by the peoples of the Allied countries as the invasion of Fortress Europa. Hitler builds the defenses for 4 years, an impregnable Atlantic wall of concrete, steel, and men. And to crush it, and what lies beyond, the Allies mount an army of nearly 3 million men, the greatest sea and air armada the world has ever known. September 1943, the American 1st Division, the Big Red One, lands at Liverpool. Veterans of the landings in Africa and Sicily, they join the 1.5 million Americans gathering in England for the invasion of Europe. One of these veterans, attached to the 16th Infantry, is Lieutenant William Joseph.
Our division is scattered all over England. My regiment winds up in a little village on the east coast. We're told we're here for the invasion of France. After Sicily, we figured we've had enough and that we're going back to the States as a training division. Well, then we get this order. Everyone is pretty well upset about it. It's an order, though, and we're stuck with it. The majority of the boys are draftees, along with a lot of 90-day wonders. But we're a pretty cocky bunch because we've seen so much action.
To prepare Operation Overlord, as Churchill names the invasion, southern England is turned into an armed camp. Awesome stockpiles of guns, ammunition, and equipment grow in the hay meadows and ferny dells of the English countryside. 16 million tons will pour into the tight little island by invasion time. The toughest training Allied troops have faced is thrown at every man. It is grinding, back-breaking, relentless, endless.
We go into high gear for this invasion, and the boys get pretty proficient. We go into assaultry, the highest level. Assaultry of this sort is a pretty special kind of thing. One of the things about this training is that we have so much stuff to carry. Every bit of gear is doubled because they expect us to lose most of it. They tell us it'll be tough. We work it all out and we carry about 150 pounds of gear. Try to run with this, but we have to. Once in a while we get up to London on a 2-day pass. It's good to have a breather.
there are no breathers across the English Channel. For 4 years, Hitler's Atlantic Wall has been his obsession. For 4 years, thousands of laborers have worked to forge its guns, pillboxes, and concrete obstacles into an impregnable barricade. The wall would be even stronger if Germany's commander-in-chief in the West, Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt, believed in it as much as Hitler. With 2,000 miles of coastline to defend, von Rundstedt believes with Frederick the Great that he who defends all defends nothing. Assuming the initial landing will be successful, von Rundstedt plans to move his powerful reserve force up instantly and drive the invasion army back into the sea. When Field Marshal Erwin Rommel is ordered to France in late 1943, it is to conduct an inspection tour of the Atlantic defenses. Concluding that the success of Rundstedt's defense depends on air cover that the dwindling Luftwaffe can no longer provide, he urges drastic revisions. In January 1944, Rommel is given principal responsibility for the coast defense. Convinced that the invasion team must be destroyed before it ever gets across the beaches, the energetic Desert Fox orders every gap in the wall closed. The high water line, he says, must be the main fighting line. Rommel sets about turning the approaches into a nightmare of submerged obstacles, concrete dragon's teeth, hedgehogs, mines, and spikes. On the beaches themselves, the artillery is roofed and walled with concrete, laced together with miles of barbed wire. Thousands of new tank traps, obstacles, and pillboxes are added to the wall. By the end of May, 4 million mines, each one capable of blowing a man's legs off, are buried in the Normandy sand. For 7 miles back, every open area is flooded or planted with obstacles to frustrate any airborne landing. Every available soldier, from baker to clerk, is ordered to man the coastal defenses. The first 24 hours will be decisive. Even with troop strength depleted by the demands of the Russian front and the Allied landings at Anzio, 14 German divisions are lined up and waiting by the middle of May. One division, ordered back from Hungary, is the crack Panzer Lehr, now the strongest panzer division in the German army. One of its tank gunners is Private Rudi Eck.
We arrive on May 20th. I have fought in Russia and France already. I'm sure our officers know exactly when the enemy is to make an invasion. Something is definitely coming up. We have to hide our tanks. There's always danger from the American side, always the airplanes. They have fighter planes with bombs. They come often, and for the first week we just try to stay out of the way. We move our tanks into position, but not too close together. Because if an airplane hits you, you all go. On the 27th of May, 12 of our tanks are ordered to come out of our hiding places and move up closer to the beach. The infantry is already there. They tell us to find a place where we can see everything, but where we can't be seen. We have a saying in the German army that it is better to have a good shooting range than a place to hide. I think the shooting is to be for my life.
One day, Eisenhower comes to see us. He walks up and down the ranks, and a lot of us get to talk to him. He asks us if we got any special problems or anything on our minds. When he asks me, I tell him I'd like to go home. And he just smiles at me and says, you know, I'd like to go home too.
To keep the Germans confused about the invasion point, the Allies staged numerous probing maneuvers up and down the French coast.
We go and probe off the shore of Calais, then we keep working south. We go in within 5 or 6 miles to shore and draw their artillery fire. Then we go into the channel again and circle around another 10 miles, then come in again. We move around to keep them guessing. One night, we have a bit of trouble from an E-boat that sneaked into our convoy. It sunk one of our ships. Later, I find there are 1,000 casualties. It might as well have been the real thing.
June 1st dawns gray and dull and marks the beginning of the worst weather in 30 years. Now all the invasion timing, dependent on the tide for the landing of troops, moonlight for the airborne, calm seas, and the simultaneous beginning of the new Russian offensive, all the careful planning hangs on a weather report. And the odds on good weather? 13 to 1 against. The British are assigned 2 beaches, codenamed Gold and Sword. The Canadians are assigned 1, codenamed Juno. The Americans get 2, Utah and Omaha. 5 in all, the beaches of Normandy, an 80-mile patch in the Atlantic Wall, the target for Overlord. Finally, on the morning of June 5th, after already calling the ships back once because of the weather, Eisenhower makes the agonizing decision. He says simply, "We'll go." And the greatest invasion in the history of man is underway.
Feeling. I tell my friends, I think something is going to happen tomorrow. And they just tell me I'm a dreamer. And I say, no, I have a feeling like I will die tomorrow. And they say, I hope nothing happens to you. I hope not too.
The weather odds are also known to Field Marshal Rommel. So on June 5th, he leaves his headquarters to go home for his wife's birthday. The weather is bad, and he knows that the Allies never land in bad weather. June 6th, 1944. Across the same storm-tossed English Channel, which 356 years earlier had defeated the proud Spanish Armada, now steams another, 5,300 ships, moving toward the liberation of Europe. Overhead, thousands of fighter planes, hundreds of troop transports and gliders carrying the paratroop vanguard of the invasion.
Tension of it all. Can't do anything about it. And then the rendezvousing stops. We all straighten out in the line. We can barely see the shore of France, the beaches of Normandy. But now, nobody is sick.
The waves are high. The clouds are low and threatening. But by dawn, all the convoys are unloading their human and mechanical cargo into landing craft.
We wonder how we're going to make this invasion. I think an LST will never make it in this water. The waves are around around 20 feet high. A lot of the boys break their legs when they try to change ships. I think half the battle is to get on the damn landing craft.
Somebody wakes me up, and she's very excited, and she says, something is going on. Maybe you must be right what you said last night, that something is coming up.
Loaded with 32 men each, the landing craft start the run for the beach.
I'm up at the front of the landing craft, and I crawl up on the ramp and look at the beach. It looks kind of hazy and smoky. The closer we get in, we can hear these bullets hitting. All sorts of shells start hitting around the water. And we are about 100 yards out. We are supposed to come in a bit closer. There's a strong tide, but we all come charging out and jumping over the sides. When we first come out, it's about 2 feet deep. After we go another 10 or 20 yards, it's over our heads. The storm has washed out the sand. It takes about 15 minutes to get in.
For the 8 companies of men coming into Omaha Beach, the Rommel nightmare begins to come true. It is here that the struggle is fiercest. Omaha Beach. 6 miles of hell with 100-foot cliffs at either end.
They're firing tank and machine guns at us. When our first tank's off the landing craft, we see them sink to the bottom, just yards from the beaches.
Amid sinking tanks and exploding landing craft, raked by machine gun fire, many of the men sink and drown as they step off the landing craft.
I look from my firing and I see there are many soldiers on the beach. They are coming and coming. We have good defenses. I see down on the beach the mines blowing up. I see the Americans hiding behind the iron obstacles. I see soldiers falling in the water and on the beach.
Nobody's moving on the beach. Just all of us laying in the sand, shoulder to shoulder. Nobody cares whether he gets killed or whether anybody gets killed. It's a feeling like you're dead, or you're gonna be dead.
While everything goes wrong on Omaha Beach, nearly everything is right on Utah Beach. The U.S. 4th Division lands there with little resistance and moves rapidly inland. At Juneau Beach, the high seas and German defenses are frustrating. CND strip is marked with the dead and the dying of both sides. Sword Beach is a small beach, but a naval port and guarded by heavy gun emplacements. Weather and terrain take heavy casualties from the British first wave. At Gold Beach, amphibious tanks are vital in wiping out enemy gun emplacements. The men on the beaches are not fighting alone. In this one day, 10,000 flights of aircraft battered German defenses with more than 11,000 tons of bombs. But of all the beaches, it is on Omaha Beach that the struggle is fiercest. Of all the beaches, this is the most disastrous. As the hours go by, it gets tighter and tighter. It is on the beaches that, face to face, man to man, the victory must be won.
Keep coming in. I can see fellas getting hit, drowning, but they keep coming. I climb up this cliff and finally 20 men or so join me. They say they can't see anything to shoot at. I say just keep shooting.
I see our soldiers wounded. I see our soldiers dying. I think of my friends at home dead from the bombing. I try to be a good soldier.
With the troops moving inland everywhere, it is apparent that the gamble has paid off. Although nobody knows the exact figures, approximately 160,000 men are ashore by the end of D-Day. The beachhead is secure. Lieutenant William Joseph fights his way through France, helps liberate Paris, then is wounded and blown out of his bed by a bomb. Private Rudy Eck and his tank are forced to pull back. Later he fights in the Battle of the Bulge and through the Rhineland, is awarded the Iron Cross before being taken prisoner by the Americans near the River Elbe. It took months of planning and the sacrifice of 10,000 young men to break Hitler's wall on D-Day. In 1943, Jack Nickerson was a second lieutenant, a platoon leader in the 1st Armored Division in Tunisia, North Africa. Today, he is an assistant vice president of a bank in Oakland, California.
I had no preconceived picture of the enemy, no hate, other than that they were keeping us from doing what we wanted to do. I thought then that had 2 or 3 top Germans been eliminated, the war would have stopped. I realized later that this wouldn't have changed anything.
Arnold Steiner was a private in the 10th Panzer Division of Rommel's Panzer Army, Africa, in 1943. He lives today in Parsippany, New Jersey, where he works as a machinist.
Our captain told us you don't have to worry much about the Americans, because they are all gangsters, mostly ex-prisoners from Sing Sing. They all have crew cuts. We did not believe this, of course, but we did find out that most Americans had crew cuts.
During the bloody days of the North African campaign, the lives of Lieutenant Nickerson and Private Steiner came together for a brief moment. Now, 1 American, 1 German, relive that moment in history. I'm Jim Bishop. 1942. The Allies decide to invade French North Africa. The Allied objective, block Axis occupation of these French territories, seize Allied bases for operations against Italy and Germany from the south. Operation Torch is to be the first great amphibious landing of World War II. June 1942. The Western powers revive a project for the invasion of North Africa, designed to trap Rommel and provide North African bases. Operation Torch is hastily put into preparation. Lieutenant General Dwight D. Eisenhower will command the complex arrangements of air, sea, and land forces. Among the many thousands of Americans being trained for this invasion is a recent graduate of Officers Candidate School, Second Lieutenant Jack Nickerson, attached to the 3rd Infantry Division.
The training is rough. I know because I'm losing weight. In addition to all the regular infantry procedures, we're learning about amphibious landings, getting in and out of Higgins boats, and so forth. We have dry runs in Puget Sound. At this point, we'd all trade exercises for action, wherever it is. We'd just as soon get underway.
In Germany, new recruits are being trained as much-needed replacements for the Wehrmacht. One of these men, a young draftee in a camp in Poland, is Private Arnold Steiner.
The training is quite difficult, even for men in their 20s. We lift weights of 70 kilos, which is about 150 pounds. We are training to go to Russia as engineers. We have to do all sorts of things, like laying mines, operating anti-tank guns, and building bridges. One day the captain says to us, we need volunteers to go to Africa. But we only want soldiers with blood type O, and soldiers who can stand up to a climate like North Africa. I happen to have blood type O, so I sign up.
At the end of October, ships quietly slip out to sea from various ports in the United States and Great Britain. At the rendezvous are 350 warships and 500 transports. Their destination, the North African coast. The landings are set for November 8th to coincide with the 8th Army's offensive from El Alamein. The landings will be at Casablanca, Oran, and Algiers in French North Africa.
The first day out, we're told that we're going to invade North Africa. Our ship becomes a floating schoolhouse with classes in Arabic customs and the French political situation. Our primary task is to keep up the morale of the men and see that they remain in good physical condition. This is tough since the ships are crowded. We assign the men a minimum of duty and give them all the fresh air and freedom we can. There's an announcement over the loudspeaker system. We're told of the British victory at El Alamein. An explanation that the British have secured a tremendous victory. Naturally, the news boosts our morale.
D-Day, November 8th, 1942. The Great Fleet has reached its objective. The Allies do not know what to expect from the French. It is a question that only the landings can answer.
Push off. We head for Fadala, about 15 miles north of Casablanca. The guidebook calls it a small fishing port and a popular pleasure port. We'll see about that. Landings have gone well. The resistance hasn't been much, but we have been strafed by a few antique French planes, given, I might add, to the French by the Americans. At first, walking feels odd. The land seems to roll like the ship's deck. After 22 days of shipboard living, we've become rather soft.
Algiers surrenders on the first day, but not without pain, as 2 British destroyers are sunk in its harbor. At Oran, the resistance is stiffer. The American 1st Armored Division is decimated by French Marines, and 2 destroyers are lost. At Casablanca, the situation hangs in doubt for 3 days before the city capitulates on the 11th. Several French ships and 1,000 Frenchmen are lost. By means of delicate negotiations, Admiral Jean d'Erlon, an important and influential French official, agrees to an armistice on November 13th. The French North African territories are now placed under Allied jurisdiction.
We've entered the city. The French are waving and cheering and handing out bottles of wine. I think we're still a little skeptical, but we have no reason to doubt the sincerity of the greeting. We feel that the people are with us.
In retaliation, German troops suddenly invade Vichy, France. At the same time, German troops race to secure key military bases in Tunisia, moving ahead of the Americans. The Tunisian ports of Bizerta and Tunis, as well as several nearby airfields, form a defense line. Rommel builds up his strength for a decisive counterattack. Soon, troop carriers are landing 1,000 men and more a day.
As soon as we land, British and American planes bomb the area. We take cover wherever we can, in the ditches, in doorways. It is our introduction to Africa and the war we have volunteered to fight. I am with the 10th Panzer Division. We don't have enough tanks yet. It is difficult to get them across from Italy. We can get men, but heavy equipment is another question.
For North Africa has now entered a new phase. Churchill says, "It is not the end, it is not the beginning of the end. It is perhaps the end of the beginning." The German reaction to the Anglo-American invasion is instantaneous. In December, the Germans repulsed the British First Army, already in sight of Tunis. Strong American forces and some French units move up to support the British First Army. Further Allied advances are hindered by the winter rains and mud.
The troop train going to Tunisia is a mess. It consists of a dinky engine and coaches resembling old streetcars. The men have to ride in the boxcars, and they still say the same thing on the side that they did in World War I, 40 and 8. I'm transferred to the 1st Armored Division as a replacement. I'm a little apprehensive about being an infantry officer in an armored division. The captain of the 2nd Battalion looks at me with my shining gold bars and says, "What am I supposed to do with you?" I answer, "That, Captain, is your problem."
As time is on the side of the Allies in the Battle of Supplies, Rommel attacks on February 14th.
It is easy to spot things at a distance. A man, a camel, a truck, a tank. We have our 75mm anti-tank gun set up in such a way that any moving object on the road beneath us can be hit. By being patient, we are able to knock out 5 American tanks in 2 minutes. My impression of the American soldier is that they do not have enough training, enough experience, or maybe they are afraid like everybody else in the battle. They stay too close together and they don't take cover fast enough. The ideal army would be our soldiers with their equipment.
The the Allies, caught by surprise, fight a series of delaying actions. Hill by hill, valley by valley, the Allies are driven back.
The division has been shipped out to new locations near Kasserine Pass this time. Our objective is to stop the German drive. There are tank battles going on all through the valley. The fighting is brutal. To my knowledge, this is the first time that the Germans have used their new Mark 6 Tiger tanks. We're still using Grants and Shermans. Needless to say, it's a very lopsided situation. The German Tiger completely outclasses us.
The green Americans at Kasserine Pass are wiped out in point-blank fighting. The Africa Corps continues the push, threatening to bisect the Allied armies. To plug the gap at Kasserine, 2 American divisions speed eastward from Oran. Thousands of trucks hauling supplies play a major role in the battle. The weather clears. 104 American aircraft are seen over Kasserine alone. By the end of February, Rommel retreats to his original position, the Marath Line, a bristling system of fortifications built before the war by the French.
We are very short of drinking water. The American fighter planes have shut up our supply of water trucks. Sometimes we don't get supplies for 2 or 3 days.
While the Torch forces move in from the northwest, the British 8th Army attacks the Marath Line head-on and from the southern flank.
The British artillery are hitting our positions. They are hitting right on the button. And there are many casualties.
On the 26th of March, resistance along the Marath Line is broken. The Germans retreat to the Cape Bon Peninsula. On the 7th of April, the Americans link up with the British 8th Army. The trap is closing. great series of assaults begin across the Tunisian hills.
Naturally, we're often afraid, but I've every reason to believe that I'll survive this campaign. I don't plan on getting bumped off. My platoon has been given orders to assault Hill 315. The hill is supposed to be unoccupied. It's anything but. The Germans are well entrenched there. I see a lieutenant leading his men down a hill and I call out, "I'm sure glad to see you and your platoon." He answers, "Platoon, hell, this is what's left of my company. We've assaulted this damn hill 3 times and lost it. This is our 4th trip." The Germans have spotted us from camouflaged positions. One shell hits off to our right. Nobody is hurt. The second shell hit 6 of my men and myself.
The fighting rages all around. We have taken cover in a cave downhill from the enemy. We are surrounded. There is nothing to do but give up. We started with 75 men and now we have only 5 left. One of the American guards says to us in German, "You have nothing to worry about. Just relax and be calm." We are given cigarettes, soap, and plenty to eat. We have nothing to worry about, just like he said.
On May 7th, Tunis and Bizerta fall to the Allies. The German collapse is now complete. The trap is shut. On May 20th, 1943, a gigantic victory parade is held in Tunis. 2 soldiers are not there. Private Arnold Steiner has been sent to the United States as a prisoner of war. In 1946, he will make the long trip back to Berlin. Lieutenant Jack Nickerson spends many weeks in North African hospitals recovering from his wounds. Subsequently, he is sent to a rehabilitation center in England, where he remains until the war's end. Thus concludes Operation Torch. The green, raw Americans are now veterans and bloody.